All right, we're looking at 9.1, dealing with area and perimeter. Area is the number of square units in the interior of an object. Area is a two-dimensional measurement, So we're dealing with square units. It's not something you can just measure with a ruler. So right here, an example, it says find the area of the figure below. Notice this is a rectangle, but it's been divided up into a bunch of little squares. So if I wanted to know the area of this, I could count these. These are called unit squares. They're 1 unit by 1 unit. So it's 1 unit square. You could count the number of squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. So the area is 36 square units, or units squared. Now, we don't want to have to count every time, especially as the numbers get bigger. It was tedious enough counting 36 squares. And so we come up with formulas that will help us find the area easier. And so for a rectangle, we learn that we can do length times width, or base times height. So I just count the length. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I count the width, or the height. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can just multiply those. So you're just doing that length times width, 9 times 4, and we get 36. So same thing I got when I was counting, but we can do it with the formula as well. But make sure we understand that when we're doing area, it's a number of square units. It's not something you can measure with a ruler. It's not one-dimensional. It is two-dimensional, square units. So here are some of our area formulas for the shapes that we're going to be dealing with. So the parallelogram, we do base times height. Rectangle can be base times height, or we can call it length times width. The rhombus is 1/2 times diagonal 1 times diagonal 2. Rhombus is also a type of parallelogram, though, so we could also do base times height. So it just depends on which information they give you as to which formula you will use. And then for a square, you can just do side squared. Now a square is a type of parallelogram, rectangle, and rhombus, so you can also use the formulas for parallelogram, rectangle, or rhombus as well. So again, it just depends on the information they give you, but most commonly we'll just do side squared for a square. For triangle, it's 1/2 times base times height, and for trapezoid, it's 1/2 times the sum of the bases times the height. And this right here is a very, very important piece of information. Base and height are always perpendicular, and if you don't remember what perpendicular means, it means that they form right angles. They intersect to form right angles. So every single time we're talking about base and height, okay, every single time we're talking about the bases and the height, those things are going to be perpendicular. In every single shape, base and height, they're always perpendicular. So if you're having a hard time identifying what's the base, what's the height, find that right angle. Find that right angle. The base is always going to be one of the sides. The height will sometimes be a side, but oftentimes the height is not one of the sides. All right, we're also talking about perimeter today, and perimeter is the distance around an object, around the outside. So we find perimeter by just adding up all the sides. Now there are some formulas for some of the shapes, but you really don't need a bunch of formulas. You just add up all the sides to get perimeter. Make sure you're not adding up diagonals and heights and things that are inside the figure. Make sure you're only adding up the sides. All right, so each time, first thing you got to do is identify what shape you're dealing with. So you notice that the opposite sides are congruent, and they look like they're parallel. And notice you don't have right angles here, so this is a parallelogram. This is a parallelogram. So remember, for parallelogram, the area is base times height. So over here, we're going to need to find the base and height first before we can find the area. So the base, remember I told you base and height are perpendicular. You're looking for that right angle. And the base will be one of the sides, and the height does not need to be one of the sides. It'll be what's perpendicular to that base. So the base is 10 centimeters, and the height is 4 centimeters. So I'm just doing base times height, and that gives me an area of 40 centimeters squared. And focus on those units. When we're doing base and we're doing height, those are one-dimensional measurements. Those are things you could measure with a ruler. Those are just plain old centimeters. But when we do area, area is two-dimensional. It is units squared. It is centimeters squared. And then for perimeter, we just add up all the sides, right? So the sides are 10, 8, 10, and 8. Make sure you are not adding this 4. That is not one of the sides. We do not add that for perimeter. So when we add those all up, we should get 36. And perimeter is a one-dimensional measurement. Perimeter is a one-dimensional measurement, so it should just be regular centimeters. All right, look at example 3. You should notice that all of the sides are congruent. When you notice that all the sides are congruent, that's going to be a rhombus. There's no right angles, so it will not be a square. It'll just be a rhombus. So remember, the formula for area of a rhombus was 1/2 times diagonal 1 times diagonal 2. So I just need the lengths of the diagonals first before I can find the area. So this is a diagonal, and this is a diagonal. So this diagonal right here is 8 units because we're adding 4 plus 4. And this diagonal is 6 units because we're adding the 3 and the 3 together. Notice they did not provide me with what the units are in the picture, so we're just going with the U for generic units. And then I'm just substituting those diagonals into the formula. 8 and 6. So 1/2 times 8 is 4. 4 times 6 is 24. So the area is 24 units squared. Area is always units squared. Okay, the side lengths are all 5. So each side length is 5 units. And for perimeter, we just add up all the sides. Now I can do 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, or since all the sides are the exact same thing, I can just take the length of the side, multiply it by how many sides I have, and that will give me the perimeter. Again, perimeter is a one-dimensional measurement, so it's just plain regular units. All right, example 4. We are looking at a trapezoid, and I know it's a trapezoid because these arrows tell me that these sides are parallel to each other, while I can tell that these sides are not parallel to each other. So a trapezoid is a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides. So we're dealing with a trapezoid, so the area formula is 1/2 times the sum of the bases times the height. So we need the bases and the height before we can get the area. So the bases of a trapezoid are always the sides that are parallel to each other. So the two sides that are parallel to each other are the 8 and the 12. So those are the bases. And put those over here. Again, they did not specify the units for us. We'll use U for just generic units. And then we need the height. And again, base and height are always perpendicular. You're looking for that right angle. If this is a base and this is perpendicular to that base, then this is going to be the height. So the height is 7 units. So we got the two bases, we got the height, we got everything we need. Go ahead and find out what the area is. So 8 plus 12 is 20. Half of 20 is 10. And 10 times 7 is 70. So the area is 70 units squared. Again, area, square units, 2 dimensions, units squared. All right, last problem for this one. This is not a figure where we have a name for this whole shape. This is what we call a composite figure. It's where you take multiple shapes and put them together into one unique shape. So the way we want to handle composite figures is to kind of find some dividing lines to split things up, and we can find areas of the individual parts and then add it all up for the total area. So the easiest, there's multiple ways you could do this, but the easiest way, in my opinion, is to draw this line right through here, and then we have a rectangle here and a rectangle here. We just find the area of each one individually and add them all together. Notice we are assuming that all these angles here are right angles. So these will be squares and rectangles. Alright, so for area of a rectangle, it's just length times width. So focusing on this rectangle first, I need to know what this length is right here. So I see this is 5. I see this is 6 because opposite sides are congruent. And I see this is 5, so I add them all up. 5 plus 6 is 11, plus 5 more is 16. So that is 16. So for the length times width for that one, the length and width are 16 and 4. So 16 times 4 is 64. And so that's the area of this particular rectangle. And then I need to get the area of this one. And it looks like this is actually a square based on the numbers anyhow. So I can either do side squared or I can do length times width. You're either doing 6 squared or 6 times 6, which is really the exact same thing. And I get the area of this one is 36. So again, once you have split that composite figure up into separate shapes and you find the area of each individual shape, you just need to add those together. So I'm going to take this area and add them together. And when I do that, find out that the area of this entire composite figure is 100 units squared. Now we also need to do the perimeter. So for perimeter, we just add up all the sides. Add up all the sides. So I'm going to put a little mark here to remind myself where I started, so I don't accidentally count something twice or forget to count something. So we have 4, 5, 6, 6, 6, 5, 4, and 16. Notice I did not count this right here because this is not one of the things on the outside of the figure. That's going through the interior of the figure. We're not going to count that. So let's add up all the ones we do have. 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 5 plus 4 plus 16. And that gives us a total of 52 units. So the perimeter, the distance around the outside, is 52 units.